I can still hear the sentence, as if it were stitched into the lining of my ears. A girl like, "You should be grateful I even dated you." Oliver said it loud enough for the waitstaff to turn their heads, pushed the leather billfold toward me like a magician, revealing a cruel trick, and walked out with his 2 co-workers, all 3 laughing as if the punchline were my face. I didn't chase him. I didn't cry. I didn't do anything but breathe and count the seconds it took for the door to swing shut behind them. The waiter hovered with a look I've only ever seen on people have watched a glass fall from a great height and are waiting for the shatter. I paid with a credit card that still hadn't recovered from December, signed a name that suddenly felt like it belonged to someone softer, and walked into the Melbourne night, where the river smelled faintly of rain and the tramlines hummed like they were trying to give advice. We had been together almost 2 years. Not a fling, not an accident. 2 years of Sunday markets and laundry folded together. While the kettle boiled, 2 years of my family asking if we were getting serious and his mum, Sandra, sending me recipes with "I'll make this next time you're over" at the end. I knew about his supposed big accounts at the agency, about the hard boss who secretly relied on him, about his vision for a boutique consultancy he'd lead someday. I also knew he'd correct my posture in photos, or lift an eyebrow when I ordered fries, or ask, in that voice he used when pretending to be kind, if I'd considered a more polished hairstyle for someone my height. I told myself honesty was a love language, and I just hadn't learned it yet. In reality, it was a hammer, and I kept offering him nails. The restaurant he chose was the kind with portions that looked like punctuation marks, and no prices on the menu. Red flag number 1. If I'd been collecting them properly. He was already at the table with Marco and Luis, 2 guys from his office who dressed like success was a shirt you could buy in 3 colors. Oliver barely looked up when I approached. "You're late," he said 2 minutes. Because parking near Flinders on a Friday might be the 9th circle of something Dante forgot to write down, and then, scanning me top to bottom. "Oh, you wore that." I was in a navy dress I loved, the one that made my shoulders look like a decision. Heat rushed to my cheeks so fast I tasted metal. I made a joke about missing the dress code. He laughed as if I'd tried to juggle and dropped everything. For an hour I listened to him talk about deck iterations and bidirectional feedback while Marco and Luis nodded with the solemn rhythm of dashboard dogs. When I offered a story about a customer at the bookstore wearing a manager, someone who cried in the poetry aisle because a line remembered something for her Oliver cut in, palm fluttering like a dismissive curtain. "She doesn't really get how things work in proper business," he said, and both men smirked at their drinks. When Marco asked how we met, I began to explain that my best friend Priya worked with all of us, cousin, and thought we might like each other, but he cleared his throat and said Priya felt bad for her. I was doing a favor. The laugh that followed was round and mean. I went to the bathroom because I wanted to keep my tears a private religion. In the stall I texted Priya a string of consonants that weren't words but were truer than silence, wiped my eyes with tissue that felt like regret, and stared at myself in the mirror until my face remembered how to behave. Back at the table, I arrived at the exact moment they were laughing about something I wasn't invited to find funny. My pasta came. Oliver watched me twirl it and said, "Carb loading for a marathon." Then, lower, but still audible, "Bold choice for your frame." When the bill arrived, he opened it, scanned the total, and slid it across the table to me. For a heartbeat, I thought he was making a joke about how outrageous it was. Then he said, very evenly, as if he were updating my address on a form, "You know what? This isn't working. I've tried, but I'm not attracted to you anymore. We should break up." "In the middle of dinner?" I asked, not loudly. "In the middle of dinner," he confirmed, already standing, jacket on, chin held like a ruler balancing there. "And then, a girl like you should be grateful I even dated you." He didn't whisper. He wanted the sentence to belong to witnesses. They left. I signed. I walked to my car as my phone began vibrating with Priya's name insisting. "What happened?" she asked when I answered, her voice already rolling up its sleeves. "Tell me everything." By the time I reached my apartment in Carlton, she was on my couch with a tub of salted caramel and a bottle of wine. And I was sobbing so hard she had to pour both. We debriefed in the mess language of the freshly humiliated out of order, overly detailed, joking to keep from keening. I told her about the dress comment, the proper business dig, the pasta remark, the check, the final sentence that still buzzed like a wasp behind my teeth. Priya listened. Then her face did a little pivot. "I've learned to trust." "What exactly did he say about work tonight?" she asked carefully. "He said he has a new campaign he's running, that the boss loved his strategy, that he's basically leading a team now." Priya exhaled through her nose, which she does when she's trying to be tactful and failing. "Okay. My cousin Zara temped at his company last quarter. If Oliver's leading a team, then the team is one assistant and a dying printer. He's not what he says he is, Rhea." It was like finding a loose floorboard and discovering you'd been living above a crawl space, full of secrets. We went digging. Old texts, photos, stories he'd told that once felt unimportant and now glowed with neon inconsistencies. Weeks had been on a client trip to Sydney and yet had location tags from a bar in Fitzroy. A conference selfie stolen from the company's LinkedIn album, same blazer, same backdrop, different man's name on the lanyard if you zoomed. I couldn't sleep. At 3:13 in the morning, a message from an unknown number arrived. "Hey, I'm Ethan. I work with Oliver. Priya passed me your contact. I think there's stuff you should know." We met the next day in a cafe that smelled like cardamom and new beginnings. Ethan had kind eyes and the look of someone who's been carrying a thing alone, and is relieved to put it down. He told me Oliver wasn't a marketing manager. He was an administrative assistant who booked rooms and updated spreadsheets, and had recently gotten a formal warning for taking credit on a pitch he hadn't touched. The business trips were days off he'd invented. The boss who relied on him was a woman who kept a file of his fabrications. "Has been telling everyone he dumped you because you're clingy and obsessed with marriage," Ethan added apologetically. I laughed in a way laughter shouldn't sound. He literally made a Pinterest board called Our Loft and told me it was for work research, I said. Ethan seemed genuinely sorry on behalf of the universe. That evening my phone rang with unknown caller in all caps. I almost declined. Something in me, a leftover courtesy shaped like a yes, made me answer. "Rhea dear, it's Sandra," Oliver's mum said, warmth wrapped in worry. "Is everything all right between you and Ollie? He said you had a tiff, but you'll sort it out. And we're so excited to see you Saturday for his birthday. He told us you have big news." I sat so still I could hear the refrigerator decide to cycle on. "Big news?" I repeated. "Yes," she said, delighted. "We're all dying to know." When I hung up, Priya stared at me like I'd just announced I'd joined a cult. "He told them you're still together?" she asked. "And that you have news?" We looked at each other and didn't need words for the plan to stand up between us fully formed. I drove to Brighton on Saturday with my palms sweating so much the steering wheel felt like a sea creature. I told myself I could turn around at any time. I told myself I didn't owe this family anything. I told myself the truth is a door you walk through even when your legs are jelly. Sandra opened the door in an apron and hugged me like her kitchen smelled roast lamb and rosemary. "You look wonderful," she said, brushing a bit of nothing from my shoulder. In the lounge, Oliver laughed at something his cousin said, glass in hand, posture rehearsed. Then he saw me. For a second, the mask slipped and a small, real fear blinked in his eyes. He crossed the room in 3 long steps, smile on, voice low. "We need to talk privately." I kissed the air near his cheek and said, loud enough for the room, "Wouldn't miss your birthday." especially with the big news you told everyone about. Color evacuated his face like a fire drill. Dinner was crowded and bright, and had the sticky sweetness of a situation pretending to be normal. Oliver steered the conversation as if piloting it away from rocks, mentioning his promotion, his team, his new responsibilities. His dad, Peter, who rarely asks anything he doesn't want to know the answer to, said, "How's the Henderson account?" I watched Oliver's mouth move through phrases that sounded like business fortune cookies. Zoe, his sister, caught my eye across the table and raised one eyebrow. "Which is family, for I am not buying what this man is selling." Sandra asked, with joyful tactlessness, "So, what's the big news? Are you too?" She wiggled her eyebrows in a way that made the table laugh. Oliver smiled too hard and said it wasn't quite the moment. His grandmother, Nana June, who has all the subtlety of a well-aimed shoe, said, "Well, if you're not getting engaged, at least say you're moving in. Because I'm tired of remembering who lives where." "We're not," I said pleasantly. "We actually had a very memorable dinner last week at I looked at Oliver. What was the name again?" "Love. The one with your mates, Marco and Luis." The doorbell rang. Perfect timing is a character in some stories in mine. It was Ethan holding a folder like a passport. "Apologies for dropping by," he said, cheeks pink with politeness. "It's about Monday's deliverables. Thought Oliver could sign these now." Peter clapped him on the back and said, "Stay for cake. We're already in the middle of everything else." Oliver tried to shepherd him toward the door. Peter didn't budge. "How did your big presentation go?" Peter asked Ethan in the tone of a man checking the structural integrity of a bridge. Ethan glanced at me, then at Oliver, then at Sandra's hopeful face. And you could see the moment he chose not to be complicit. "Our director delivered it," he said carefully. "Oliver and I helped with logistics." The room stilled like theater just before the scene change. Zoe folded her arms. Nana June made a small sound like a kettle that has started but not finished boiling. I told the story. Not with performance. Not with venom. Just the events in a row. How had invited me to meet his colleagues. How had belittled me all evening. How had announced the breakup as if he were telling the table the special of the day. How had said the sentence that should never be said to any person about any person. I mentioned the amount on the bill because numbers have a way of underlining things. Oliver tried to interrupt 3 times. And 3 times Peter said his name in a way I had never heard before, flat and father. Ethan, pale but steady, added what he could prove. He didn't gossip, he brought facts. He showed the text Marco sent, bragging about what Oliver did to put his girl in her place. He showed our email requiring Oliver to attend a meeting Monday regarding misrepresentation. He looked apologetic in that way decent people do when telling the truth hurts someone. Who deserves to be hurt? Sandra set the cake down and didn't light the candles. Her hands were shaking, just enough to quiver the little sugar flowers. Oliver erupted then, the way a badly lidded pot finally does. He accused me of trying to make him look small. He called Ethan disloyal, his family gullible, everyone jealous. He pointed at me with the hand that wasn't shaking and said the line again, "A girl like her should be grateful I bothered," and nobody moved for a second because shame made the air heavy. Sandra said, "Enough." Oliver left, slamming the door so hard one of the framed photos rattled itself crooked. We ate cake without the birthday boy. It was both the strangest and most peaceful dessert of my life. Sandra apologized so many times she ran out of synonyms. Peter looked like a man who had heard a bridge groan and knew he should have checked the bolts sooner. Zoe brought a damp cloth for the water Oliver had knocked over and said to me, matter of fact, "You didn't deserve any of that." Ethan sat beside me and kept saying in sorry, indifferent, gentle ways. The next morning my phone woke me with 13 missed calls and a flock of messages. That felt like birds hitting a window. 3 from Sandra, 2 from Zoe. Several unknown numbers. One from Ethan that said simply, "Please ring me when you can." Sandra answered on the first ring. Oliver had been drinking. Had shown up at an ex's flat at 2 in the morning, slurring about betrayal, until the woman called Zoe to come get him. Had posted a Facebook manifesto about snakes. Had sent Ethan a threat that would be laughable if it weren't a threat. Most alarming. Had messaged Marco my address with him going to make her pay for humiliating me attached. Marco, whose moral compass apparently still points somewhere useful, forwarded it to Sandra, who called me and kept apologizing to a person she hadn't harmed. A knock at my door sent my heart sprinting to my throat. It was Sandra and Zoe, holding coffee and pastries and embarrassment like umbrellas. They couldn't close. We sat at my tiny kitchen table with its wobbly leg and sorted through the pile of what have we got here. Ethan arrived 10 minutes later because Oliver had been ringing him too, saying he was coming over to sort me out. The building manager knocked to inform me that Oliver had been in the lobby, demanding to be let up. Security had escorted him out after he called me a liar loudly enough for the entire ground floor to get the gist. When Oliver banged on my door, I dialed security again and didn't open it. He kicked it once, petulant as a child, and then the guard's voice came through, "Leave now, or we call the police." Silence followed like a mercy. Oliver lost his job within the week. He stopped showing up, sent an email to the whole floor that began "To whom it may concern. The truth is a construct," and CCED clients who did not appreciate being part of his unraveling. He moved to his uncle's place in Wollongong, according to Sandra, who still texts me on holidays to ask if I've tried the lemon slice recipe she sent. His social media went quiet in the way of people who discover the cost of an audience. Joey told me the family finally set a boundary that sounded like love but felt like a line. Therapy or no help. I changed my locks, rearranged my furniture, and painted my living room white because white looks like possibility. Priya and I took the dress I'd worn that night and refused to let it be ruined by his opinion. I wore it to a friend's gallery opening and 3 strangers told me it made my shoulders look like a decision again. I saved the voicemails Oliver left, angry, pleading, nostalgic, alternating like a metronome just in case. And then I blocked him everywhere. I ran into him once at a Kmart in Brunswick. He was holding a packet of socks and the sort of tired that doesn't sleep. He saw me and pivoted away so fast the basket wobbled. I didn't follow. Ethan and I became allies, then friends. We have the unglamorous kind of friendship made of cheap dumplings on Thursday nights and sending each other TikToks at 2 in the afternoon because some baby goat has learned to jump. We're not dating. Priya keeps nudging the idea like a cat nudges a closed door. It's nice to have someone in my life who witnessed the worst hour and still looks at me like I'm not defined by it. Sometimes I replay that dinner, not to reopen the wound, but to study the anatomy of it. There were so many moments I could have excused. So many sentences I could have called honesty or banter or has just stressed. I'm learning the difference between critique and contempt. I'm learning that love is not a room with mirrors that make you smaller. It's a field. You should be able to run in it without worrying how your legs look. Sandra's lemon slice is, for the record, excellent. She came by once with a container and a letter that made my throat tight. "I'm sorry," she wrote. "Not because I did the things Oliver did, but because I believed the version he told me, which allowed him to keep telling it. Thank you for telling us the truth even though it cost you something." I cried over compressed milk and coconut and thought about how the world would be if we trained ourselves to apologize for the harm we enable, not just the harm we cause. If you're waiting for a moral, I don't have one that fits on a fridge magnet. I have small things that feel like truths when I hold them up to the light. People tell you who they are in the way they talk to you when they're trying to impress someone else. A person who leaves you with a bill will someday try to leave you with a bigger one. Humiliation is a terrible sculptor if you let it. It will carve you into a shape that fits into someone else's pocket. The antidote is slow, good friends, ugly crying, long walks by the river, while you narrate your own life back to yourself in a kinder voice. When I think of Oliver now, I don't see the restaurant or the bill or even the sentence that became famous to me. I see a boy on a sinking raft made of lies, panicking because the shore is honest and close. I don't forgive. I don't need to. Forgiveness would require continuing the conversation. I just put the raft out of view. I step onto the shore and keep walking. A month ago, a woman came into the shop and asked for a book that won't fix me, but might help me stand up. I gave her a Mary Oliver collection and a slim novel about someone who survives by deciding to. She bought both and came back a week later to tell me the poems made her feel like the sky wasn't indifferent. That's a lot for $30, she said, smiling. I thought about the dinner, the cake without a birthday boy, the knock at my door, the security guard's firm voice, Ethan's steady folder, Sandra's shaking hands, Zoe's raised eyebrow, Priya's ice cream, and my own name on a receipt that once felt like a surrender and now feels like a signature on a different life. It is a lot, I said. Some things are worth it. If you're reading this because you've got your own version of him or her or them in your past or your present, know this: you don't have to swallow it to prove you're strong. Strength isn't a stomach. It's a horizon. You keep moving toward it, and the worst of what happened becomes exactly what it is: behind you.